everyone. Mr. James O'Neill here, speaker and owner of Mastery for All. Mastery for All partners with school districts to bring mastery of mathematics through professional development, through coaching, and through consulting. I want to see everybody master mathematics, specifically our Black boys who have historically not mastered it in this space. And so one day I was literally on LinkedIn and there was this article titled, "Is Math a Racist Subject?" And I read that article and I said, I want to do a podcast on that. And so I'm bringing in my friends, people that I've met in the space, people that actually have reached out to me and say, hey, I want to speak to this subject about equity. And so I did not prompt them in their answers. They are literally speaking from their experiences, from the research as it relates to equitable instruction in mathematics. So I want you to sit tight. I want you to have an open mind, an open heart, an open spirit to listen and to hear these experts speak to this subject. Is math a racist subject? And I'm going to see you on the other side. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mastery for All with Mr. James O'Neill. We are digging into our series, Is Math a Racist Subject? And today I have Jen with me. Hey, Jen.
Hi, James.
Good to see you. We did plan on the purple matching together because we're just so in sync and brilliant together. So we just showed up and just like, hey, you're wearing purple, I'm going to wear purple. So without even a conversation.
But vibed. We knew it.
That's what we do. That's what we do. But I'm glad you're here. And all those people that are listening, you already know that if I'm bringing somebody on, it's because they are an expert. They are brilliant in this field of mathematics. And so let me introduce you all to Jen. Jen has 24 years of experience in math education. She has taught at the elementary, middle, and high school level, but has a special place in her heart for middle school students and teachers. That's where I've been at. She has served in several leadership roles, most recently as the K-12 math director of Guilford County Schools here in North Carolina. In that role, she led curriculum implementation and professional development at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. As the director of mathematics leadership at Unbound Ed, Jen will work on the development of and the management of MELA, which is the Math Identity Leadership Accelerator grant, along with supporting coaches during the virtual summits. Jen is passionate about all students seeing themselves as mathematicians. So to the Mastery for All audience, let's give it up for Jen Arberg. Woo, 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 woo.
Give it up for you, Mr. O'Neill.
Oh, Mr. O'Neill, that's what I've been called for the past ever. So, Jen, we're going to hop right into the podcast today. Again, thank you for showing up. Thank you for agreeing to be here. And I always start the podcast with the question, which is the topic, which is the subject of the series. And your thoughts around, is math a racist subject? What are your thoughts? What is what you're thinking around that?
Well, we're jumping right in, James, with the $1 million question. So that question makes me think of all the social media memes that you see where people say, oh, we're saying 2 + 2 = 4 is racist. This is crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you're doing this podcast to just dispel this myth and get to actually what we're talking about. Do I think the subject of math is solving an equation, a mathematical fact, racist? No. However, do I think the way that we teach math in schools, the way that we provide math instruction to our students can be either not affirming or even harmful to students' math identities? Yes, I do. So that is where I stand, James, on the is math racist line.
Well, it was clear to me as what you are saying. The subject in general, like you said, the 2 + 2 = 4 is not racist. The what we do with the subject can be harmful to student math identities. And a lot of people, I didn't really, before I got into education or even started teaching, Seems crazy. I can say like 15 years ago. That's crazy. And that's how you know you get becoming a veteran. And when they started calling me a veteran teacher, and I was like, no, I'm still young and I still look good. Don't be calling me a veteran. Like I'm not old.
I don't know whose bio you read because I'm only 26, James. Yes.
Exactly, exactly. And so when I thought about that and I think about math identities, I've only been exposed to that probably in the past 3 to 4 years. Can you speak to the importance of what is a math identity? And what's the importance of having a strong one? Or you said we might make decisions to harm math identities. What does that look like? What is a math identity?
Yeah, it's a great question and a complex one. A lot of authors have tackled this in like multiple books that say it way better than I could. I love Danny Martin's Impact of Math Identity and KE Mathematics. Just plugging that one. You should get him on your podcast, James.
Okay.
I think about identity is the way you see yourself in the world of math is just a really simple explanation. Do you feel like you are a valid doer of mathematics and that you have things to contribute to math discussions? I know Deborah Parrott talks about if you're a mather, like have everybody seeing themselves as mathers. I think math is a really unique subject because we attach this thing about being a math person to it that you don't hear in reading or science. Like people don't ever come up and say, I'm not a social studies person.
Right.
Like they do when they say I'm not a math person. I think of all the years teaching, all the parents I've met who have come in and said, well, my child is probably going to struggle because I struggled in math too, and I'm not a math person. You have to stop them and say, like, are you a person? Have you done math? Yes, you are a math person. Like everyone is a math person. But there is this stigma around who gets to be considered a mathematician, who gets to do math, who gets access to higher level math courses, whose math we value in class, which students we pick to share their solutions. And even the math that we teach in our class, I grew up thinking, good old Pythagoras, an old white Greek guy discovered the Pythagorean theorem. No idea until grad school that Egyptians had found evidence of this and carved like hieroglyphics of it, but they're not getting the credit. Like, so thinking about whose identity we're reinforcing in a math class when we teach who made discoveries, who feels seen in a math class based on who they learn, has created all these theorems and formulas that we're teaching, and whose approaches we value. Do we only value students who do math the way we did?
Yeah.
I had a positive identity in school because I was the student that did math like the teacher. You told me to do pages numbers 2 through 60 even, and I did it just like the teacher did it, and I loved it. And then the next night I did odds, and I felt great about it.
Yeah.
I never asked why it worked. You gave me a formula, and I took it and ran with it. But again, not till grad school, and I started really thinking about why the math worked and realized I couldn't answer it. And I thought about all those students in class who would ask, well, why does it work? And I want to do it differently. And they were shut down and made to feel that they weren't as competent in math. And it was really damaging to their identity. I also work at the university level, teaching students that are pre-teachers, that are pre-service teachers.
Gotcha.
And I do, on the first night of class, like a 4 corners, describing their math anxiety. And out of a class of like 50 to 75 students, 80 to 90% classify that they have high math anxiety. And they're really nervous about teaching math, and they all want to teach kindergarten and first grade because they think there's not a lot of math involved.
Wow.
So there are so many things to unpack there about why they feel they're not good at math. You got into a state university. Like, why do you think you're not a math person?
Right.
And why do you think kindergarten and first grade aren't going to involve a lot of math? Because that's where we're laying the algebraic reasoning and foundation for all the other subjects. So I just said a lot.
You did. And you said a lot of good stuff. And while you were talking, I was writing so that I could come back and revisit some of the things that you said. And so what I really hear, I wish, I was like you, had a positive math identity, because I was that model student that if you told me to sit down, do these problems, you showed me the formula, I was great at memorizing stuff. I had a great way of chunking information in my head, especially when it came to formulas. I did the brain dumps right before the test. So I studied and just like, oh, let me write down everything because I'm not going to remember all this stuff, but why is in my head right now? So there was no sense making until you said grad school, until I got to college. And I had, God rest his soul, Dr. Lee Stiff as a professor at NC State. And I didn't know Dr. Stiff was like the president of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. I didn't know he had wrote books and all this stuff. No one ever told us that. I just knew that one day, you're talking about Pythagoras, he asked all of us going into either high school or middle school mathematics, why does a squared plus b squared equal c squared? And none of us could tell him why. And he made us feel, Dr. Stiff had a way about him. He was intimidating. He made us feel, and nobody wants to pick their head up. Everybody's looking down like, I'm not going to get eye contact with you. But he made us feel that small. And that is the first time someone really challenged me on asking me why. And I was like, I don't know why. I didn't think it was important to know why. And so when you speak to all the things as it relates to math and us being aware and the anxiety that we have, that identity is important. What are the harmful things you've seen teachers do to harm math identities?
Yeah, that it happens. And I want to preface this by saying I think 100% of teachers are going in and doing the best they know how to do every single day. So, and I know looking back, I did a lot of things that were harmful for students. And I always, love the Maya Angelou quote that when you know better, you do better, right? So definitely want to not come across as blaming at all, because I do think we're all doing the best we know how to do. But if we don't know more, we can't do better.
Right.
And while you were talking, I pulled out this quote that I love that's from Julia Aguirre, who was a co-author in The Impact of Math Identity with Danny Martin. And it is, our identities represent negotiations between who we claim to be and how others identify and label us.
That's good.
And that makes me think about your question about things we've done that are harmful to students with math identity. I think about the way that we label kids. And I think about the way we talk about kids, even if it's not in front of them. I think about how many PLCs I sat in where we talked about, and I'm doing air quotes, the low kids. And we talked about, here I'm prepping for my low class. This is my high class. And how if you're talking that way about students when they're not there, how that subconsciously affects how you treat them when they walk into your classroom. So I've really gone back and thought about so many times that I thought I was doing right by students in my inclusion class, students with IEP, students who hadn't been traditionally successful in end of grade tests. I wanted them so much to feel success in my class and to love math that I lowered the rigor level subconsciously without meaning to, with the best of intentions. But I can remember thinking, okay, well, my advanced class is going to get all of these word problems, but I don't want the language to be a trigger for some students. So I'm going to take the language out. I'm going to give them extra scaffolds, and I'm going to walk them through how to solve these equations so they can all feel success, right? And my intention did not have the same impact. Like my intention and impact did not match, because I know the message I was subconsciously sending to those students was I didn't think they were capable of handling grade level work.
And I want to just stop you real quick, because I hear I appreciate your vulnerability there, because even when you said that, I always preface the statement when people ask me, what are we doing with math and what are teachers doing and blah, 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 blah. And when you start saying what are teachers doing, that you already like, it can be a defensive thing where you like, you're not in the classroom, you don't know, blah, 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 blah. And so like you said that in the beginning, let me preface this by saying, I believe we're doing the best that we can with the knowledge that we know. And when you started to talk about the fact that you felt like I was doing this in order to give my kids access, but my intentions and what you say, my intention and my results didn't match, or
My impact.
your
Yeah.
impact, yeah, intentions and impact didn't match. And what I commonly see, and I know you commonly see the same thing in classes, the data speaks to where there's high populations of Black and Brown students, those decisions are made a lot more often for
Yes.
those kids as opposed to kids that we have expectations for, which many times can be our white, and sometimes we forget to talk about our Asian population, that they live in an expectation atmosphere or culture as it relates to math and science. And so can you speak to, like, even in your journey, when you noticed that it wasn't have the impact, how did you change that? Or did you hear something? Did you go to a professional development? Did someone call you out and be like, listen, I know what you're doing. That ain't right. Like what changed that for you?
Yeah, it is a great question. And again, I'll be super vulnerable and honest that it took longer than I would have liked for me to associate like the fact that my inclusion class, when I taught middle school, I had 3 classes: an inclusion class, a standard class, and an advanced class. And you could look in the door and by the race of the students in the room, tell which class it was, right? And this is an epidemic across our country.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, the opportunity myth, Ed Trust data has shown us that students of color aren't even being given grade level assignments. So I know, like, and how can you ever be expected to perform at grade level when you're not ever given a chance to get on the field, right? With grade level. So the fact that that was my teaching situation for years, and I just took it as, oh, okay, this is just how it is, and didn't question it, wasn't until I went back to graduate school and really started thinking about data and just unconscious bias. Again, full disclosure, I was like, I can't have any unconscious bias. I am a white liberal Democrat. I cannot have unconscious bias because I am against racism 100%. And I really had to just take a look at, was I rewarding students who behaved like I thought a math class should look like? Was I thinking, oh, the students that are sitting quietly with their hand raised, am I somehow giving them more attention, having different expectations that maybe are interrupting class and yelling, but about the content? Like, why is there one way of what math should look like? And who says that my way is the way that math should look like?
Mm-hmm.
So I think grad school was when I really opened my eyes. And that's when I really started leaning into productive struggle. I started teaching my students around productive struggle. I would give homework assignments that, like, hey, I want all of you to struggle in this for 20 minutes and just bring me evidence tomorrow. We're just going to talk about it.
I love that.
And giving it to all of my students, not just my advanced students, right? And realizing that the understanding of the why, and really not just accepting multiple representations or problem solving, but honoring it and really praising students for looking at things differently. And I think it's because that the one way of teaching math had worked for me. It wasn't until I really stopped to realize this isn't working for a lot of students.
Right.
And which students is it not working for? And I had to really confront some subconscious decisions that I was making in a classroom of who was getting called out and who wasn't.
Yeah, I hear you. And one of the things, or 2 things that you talked about, one in the beginning when we first started talking about, is like which students we pick to share, who feels seen, this whole gatekeeping thing. And this is where, like, I heard you simply said, no, I don't believe math is racist. It's the way we handle it. It can become really, we can be gatekeepers as far as who we see, who we give access to, why do we give that access to, and it can be up subconscious. It may be a decision that we just consciously make because, like you said, you get into a system. This is the way that things have always been. And so why would I expect anything differently? Why would I expect my low class to be able to do higher order thinking skills? Why would I expect that from them? Why would I expect my standard class to reach to levels that my higher level classes are doing? And so, like, that mindset shift is so important, but I gather it's being in a space where that information is being shared. And that's why it's super important. Like you said, when you know better, you don't know until you hear, right? You can actually do better. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And when I think about your journey, because you can tell me the demographics of Guilford County for the people that maybe don't know, but in your role, like what has been your experience just to making sure that all races really master mathematics?
Mhm. It's a big question. Um, so my school was very diverse in terms of we had students that spoke a lot of different languages. We had a lot of different socioeconomic levels. We had a lot of different races. Again, it breaks my heart to think how each class was not diverse, though, right?
Yeah.
So even though as a school population we were, and I thought a lot about how students were placed into those classes by a single test score when they weren't given access to grade level instruction to even take that test, right? Like that cycle,
Yeah.
how we aren't giving students, especially students at historically underserved schools that don't have the same funding, that get brand new teachers every year, that are these schools that host Black and Brown students, aren't given access to grade level instruction. They're not even given the chance to master it. Then we test them on grade level standards and use that test to place them. And like, I just started thinking how the system, I know people say the system is broken, but there's a whole other school of thought that the system was designed to perform exactly how it is doing.
Yeah.
And it benefits white students. So once I really started looking at the data, when I left the classroom, I went to a district office coaching role. And that's when I was in my bubble in the school. I was able to look, our district has 126 schools. So I was able to look at data from all of them. I was specifically working with middle schools, 24 middle schools. And I was like, wait, I'm looking at data from all of these schools. How is it that when I disaggregate this data by race, I'm seeing these trends across all of the schools? And when we disaggregate by race and socioeconomic factor, my district, socioeconomic status, sorry, our poor white students were still outperforming our middle class Black students.
Wow. Okay.
And it's like the only answer here is that our Black and Brown students aren't getting access to the same education that our white students are. So then I feel like that became my mission, is how can I change this in my district? Actually attending an Unbound Ed Institute, hearing the opening keynote where I learned all this data from the opportunity myth around which students were even given grade level access. I remember coming back and bringing that to my district, training principals on it, training instructional coaches, telling teachers, like trying to share my experiences of how with the best of intentions, I had unintentionally harmed students of color, and just tried to be vulnerable and talk to anybody that would listen. And when I would be asked to come in and look at classrooms, show them data of, hey, this is how many white students you called on. This is how many Black students you called on. These were the students that had their heads down. These were the ones you didn't say anything to.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. And so many teachers would just be like, I had never realized. So I think that gets back to your question of, if you don't know, they're like, nobody's ever given me feedback on this. They've given me feedback on whether my essential question was written on the board or whether my handouts were ready, but no one has ever called me out on making, and this goes to race and gender. Like I had no idea I was only calling on white boys. My class was calling on white girls that I didn't realize it. So I think that was my attempt at starting, was just sharing the knowledge when I got it with different stakeholders, because helping principals understand this is something you need to be looking for in your math class. Are teachers actually teaching at the grade level that aligned to the standards? Do you have the standards in your hand when you're observing to see if it's aligned to the rigor of the grade level? Having the same conversation with coaches and talking with teachers at your PLC. How are you planning that every student gets grade level instruction? And if you have students that aren't ready for grade level on this one topic, what scaffolds are you putting in place to get them to grade level without minimizing the grade level expectations?
That's powerful, Jen. That's really powerful. That whole piece of the grade level piece, like you can't get away from it. If we, like you said, disaggregate based upon race and socioeconomic status, and if the white kids, even though they're poor, are still outperforming the middle class Black kids, then there's an access problem.
Yes.
Because even money is not changing the actual performance of a child. And I mean, there's so much data that speaks to that out there, based upon race. And even though having money can change your access to different things like that. But in this country, specifically, race is such a big determining factor. And so many times people can get tired of talking about it because it's been politicized in so many ways. It's like we're now like living in a race war. But the issue at hand is that people are still not getting access because of subconscious and just sometimes deliberate decisions that people are making about people who can and who cannot. And so when you even talked about your story, it just reminded me of mine, of just like being in a classroom and not knowing that I lean a certain way, and recording. One of the teachers at my school, she was teacher of the year, an amazing teacher, Miss SR. She said one day she recorded herself and she realized that she hardly didn't talk to any of her Black students at all. And that eye-opening experience allowed her to be like, I got to be more careful. I remember noticing who I talked to, and I did this thing and my kids didn't like it as much. I said at the beginning of the year, I talked to everybody in here. So if I don't say your name in a class, I'm going to look around and be like, who have not talked to today? And I am going to talk to you. And I know that may bring some anxiety, but because I don't want y'all to feel like I favor someone over the other. And so that's super important. I appreciate you sharing your story. And you're being vulnerable, Jen. It means a lot.
Well, I mean, we have to be. When you said people are tired of talking about race, I get it. And I hear white colleagues saying that, but white people don't get to check out of conversations around race. They think they can check out, and we don't get to, because people of color don't get to check out, right? You live it every day, so we don't get to check out of conversations. I think about like tangible strategies. Again, knowing better and doing better. I started having like my clipboard where like I would try to, I'm a big fan of the 5 practices for orchestrating productive math discussions. If your listeners haven't read that book, great. Really trying to sequence student responses, connect them in ways that would, progress the learning arc. But while I was doing that, making notes on my clipboard, who have I talked to today? What have I talked to? Have I had a positive interaction with the student, right? And I don't think we can also ignore the data around behavior in school and out of school suspensions by race and how much that impacts access to grade level instruction. Because when I moved to the district level, I was also able to have access to how many students are being suspended by race. And when you're not in school, you clearly aren't getting access to grade level instruction. And when I started visiting 24 middle schools, and I could see teachers teaching throughout the block of the day and wouldn't realize, but like maybe behaviors that they would let slide in an advanced class with white students, they would not let slide in an inclusion class with students of color. Those students would be called to the office. So that was another thing to help teachers really reflect about, like, think about these behaviors and why do you react differently? Tell me about your reactions to these 2 different behaviors, right? And helping people realize, and again, like, oh, I didn't think that I was reacting differently. So I also think that is just a really big piece of the access to grade level instruction, because if kids aren't in your class, they're not getting instruction.
You just segued right into my next question.
Okay, I was wondering, it was a little off topic. Sorry, but
no, you've been on topic the entire time. And so it's no secret that Black boys are suspended at higher rates, disciplined at higher rates than anything. There's no secret as we look at the data of who is proficient, who's not. Usually the data point of who's not usually at the lowest, it's a Black boy. It represents Black male students. Not even if we get to talk about students of color, if we're going to get down to the race, usually it is the Black boys. And so I've always asked this question because, that is my heart. That's what my business really supports, all by supporting that demographic that's usually at the bottom, because I'm just like, you can't say all and they're always at the bottom. Like that's not the case. We as a Black man as well. So what are your thoughts concerning historically how Black boys have performed in math? You've already said, well, if you're suspended, you can't learn grade level content. Expand upon that. Why do you believe or have seen as, you've kind of been an overseer at the role as it relates to Black boys and proficiency in math? What's the issue? What's the problem? What are your thoughts?
So first of all, I think the problem is with the adults, not with the students, right? So I think so often we come into, I've been so many meetings where our African American males are not making the same growth and the same gains. So what can we do to fix them? And it's not about fixing the students, right? It's about fixing the teachers. It's about fixing instruction. It's about fixing structures and practices and policies in the school building. So I just want to say that first, that the issue is not the children. And that is, anytime I hear somebody say that, I feel like and I know you aren't saying that, but whenever I hear that happen in a meeting, I just want to also call out all your listeners to speak up and make sure that people know that the students are not the problem. I think about, this is obviously an experience as a white woman that I can sympathize with, but not empathize with. Is that the right way of using the words?
Yeah, empathize. Yeah.
I'm just picturing what it is like to grow up going to school and never seeing anyone that looks like me in any of my math classrooms on a poster. I never hear about a mathematician that looks like me. Granted, as a female, we got a couple white women thrown in, not many. I was still usually always the only one of a few females in advanced math classes because it was still for white men. So I think about, first of all, the lack of representation, not only with the mathematicians that I'm learning about, but around my teachers. You know that we don't have nearly enough Black male teachers. I think especially at the elementary level, you've never seen a teacher that looks like you, except maybe in PE, right? Or as a coach. You haven't had a math teacher that looks like you. I also think we know that the majority of teachers teaching students of color are white women. And I think about the media that we have been exposed to, the movies that we've been exposed to, the Dangerous Minds, Michelle Pfeiffer, where we're taught you are going to be a white savior and come in and rescue Black children from their neighborhood and bring them out. And I wish your listeners could see my sarcastic face because that's not what we're there to do.
Right.
Because students are bringing this brilliance into the classroom with them. It's our job to recognize it and cultivate it and honor what they're bringing from their community, not to think that we're there to fix it and replace it. There's so many issues going into this. So I saw your brain.
I saw your eyes. Yep, go ahead.
Lack of representation in terms of who you're learning about and who's teaching you. I think about the unconscious bias of white women who are teaching not only based on the movies we've seen, and I just think back to TV shows where I grew up in the era of Beverly Hills 90210. There was the episode where there was a Black student who got into Harvard and you think he's going to be in a gang, but surprise, he's the smart guy. And it was that was supposed to be that was the moral of the lesson is sometimes you have a really smart Black person who's not in a gang. And these were the TV shows that we were exposed to all the time. I get why we have the subconscious bias when that's what we're exposed to, and you bring that to your students, but we have to do better. You have to expose yourself to more. You have to reach out. You have to start watching different movies, reading different authors. Are the only authors you're reading white? Who are the musicians you're listening to? The educators, all of it. So it's also a lack of representation for the people that are teaching you where they're getting their knowledge. It's like this endless loop of a lack of representation. So I think about the students that I got by the time they were in 7th grade, Black boys especially, by the time they were in kindergarten, have received messages that they are not worthy of being a mathematician.
Yeah.
And you're trying to undo years of that with that negative math identity. And it's a lot. So I'm sorry, I went off on a really big tirade there, but I feel so passionately. I keep a sticky note on my laptop that is my why for why I get up every day. And it's because I want all students to see themselves as mathematicians, as learners and doers of math. because I know that they don't. So like every day I'm like, what can I be doing so that every student has that positive math identity? Because I just think it would be limitless what students could accomplish. And our students of color historically are the ones that haven't been given that privilege of having a positive math identity.
Jen, I didn't know you had the fire like that, Jen. I haven't. I was just sitting back like, come on. And yeah, I
I
am with
feel
the
very
passion.
strongly about it.
Oh, there is no doubt about how strong you feel. There is no doubt about how strong you feel. I was talking to Adrian the episode before this one, and she talked about this intellectual luxury, and I was just like, oh my gosh, she got it from an article that she read recently, but it is like how we have viewed math as something for access for only the strongest of intellects. And
Yes.
that has been the case for our white males, because that is what
Yeah.
we as a generation, as a people, should achieve to be like the white male, like, because that's the supreme. That's why we get our white supremacy from, and everything. And Jen, when I'm hearing you talk and I'm feeling your passion and your heart and your exposure and your vulnerability, just something off script. I feel like I've heard some part of the journey that you've taken to become the person and to have the lens that you have. But this person right here that I'm talking to today definitely went through the work. Like, some work was taking place for you to show up and to have your why state that, and then really begin behind that by joining the organizations you have, by telling the teachers, having the conversations. That's a courageous conversation. Did you notice that you called? Let's unpack that. So that's intentionality. And so I guess said all of that to say, if you could speak to, I know grad school was a journey from what I've heard. I know reading things and doing things, but was there another aha moment, like, I got to do better and I got to do the work in order for me to really support the kids? If there was another one, what was that? And what has that work looked like?
Yeah. So I honestly think it was surrounding myself by brilliant colleagues. 98%, I want to say 100% of whom were Black women.
Mm.
I have learned so much from amazing Black female educators. You mentioned Adrienne Baytops-Paul. The fact that people heard her and now are hearing me is also intimidating because she is so brilliant. I really started seeking out, I realized that my circle was really white in terms of my circle of friends, my circle of colleagues, the teachers that I hung out with socially at work. Even though it was a really diverse staff, we were like the students in the cafeteria. And when we went out for happy hour, it was the white teachers going out for happy hour together and the Black teachers going out for happy hour together, right? And so I really made an effort to start talking to my colleagues of color, and not about asking them the work I should do. Let me be very clear that it is not about them to teach us the work, right?
Ahead.
It is not about them to say, tell me what I need to do. That work is on me, and it is on white people everywhere. But it was so nice just even having, I remember a white friend saying, well, I don't really know what the differences are. I bet the conversations that white families have and Black families have with their kids is the same. I don't understand why we're making all these conversations around race. And I remember one of my Black friends saying, no, I have to teach my kids that when they go out, they can't wear a hoodie in the neighborhood because they're going to be perceived as a threat. Do you teach your white son that? And they were like, oh, no. And they were like, and I have to teach my kids that when they get pulled over by a cop, you better have both hands on the wheel. Do you teach your white son that? And they were like, oh, no. And I just remember my white friend being like, oh my gosh, like, I didn't even know, like, the colorblind lens. Like, I grew up in the 80s and 90s with a colorblind lens. And I think just surrounding myself, not even in work conversations, but just personal conversations, what it's like raising Black children, especially Black boys now, what it feels like having them share with me what it felt like in a meeting when a white person A lot of times a white man mansplains what they just did, or somebody
Hmm.
else reshares an idea and gets credit for it. Like saying, God, that really sucked. And have you be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even notice that. Okay. I know I wasn't the one that did it, but I didn't
Yeah.
notice that it
Yeah.
happened. I need to be on the lookout for this. So when it happens, I can stand up and be like, I'm sorry, so and so gave that exact same idea 5 minutes ago and nobody noticed and gave them credit. So I really think it was just honest conversations with friends. And I'm so grateful to them for just being a sounding board and again, not being my teachers, but just giving me the grace of learning from them.
Yeah.
Me saying, like, here are books I'm reading, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm thinking. Can I bounce this idea off you? I've just been really fortunate to have that.
I love that. I'm glad you shared that, and that's not something that you said. So I'm glad that I did ask you that. We were well, you wasn't at Standards Institute for this last time, but I said we
Another time.
were every other time we were there. But Dr. Manuel Scott, the Freedom Writer, his keynote was
I heard it was
life
amazing.
changing. I mean, life. I've never cried and laughed and cried again. And I'm not even a crier. I'm an emotional, passionate person, but it just takes me, and that's from childhood, just growing up being like, it just doesn't, men don't cry. So I've been unpacking that in my therapy and all that stuff like that. I cry a lot easier now than I've ever cried before. But I was just like, I am sobbing, like almost like the ugly
The
cry,
ugly cry.
crying, just sitting there. But he said something that I was just like, I'm going to make that sure that's one of my life missions. He talked about mentors
Mhm.
being not, well, having mentors that are not your race, and
Yes.
actually seeking that out and building and of course people talk about building relationship, whatever like that, but specifically because I think for me being in the space of education, um I don't see a lot of black men. I've seen a lot more now with the organizations I've joined. And I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
we in here. We in here. Okay, it's good to see us, looking around now. But that's not the world that we live in. But I've always sought after someone that has commonality, specifically race and gender. And I've had black women in my life all my life. So, but literally him saying that, seeking people that are not like you to
Yep.
see a side of you, to speak to a side of you that they can see that you can't see because they have a different lens. And when I hear you saying that, that's exactly what you're describing and how it's made you a better person. Isn't It's
Mhm.
inspiring to hear like your journey, your transformation as it relates to, and the openness you talked about your race and your experiences. And I know that that is a decision that you've made, but it's also like you said, something happened. And for you, it was having conversations with the black females in your school. And so thank you for sharing that, Jen.
No,
Really do.
and I still have a lot of room to grow.
All of
I
us. Yes.
really I need to learn more about our indigenous people. I do not have close friends that are Latina. Like I'm really trying to increase my circle. I just think you're never done. Um, and it's definitely not something where I'm like, oh, check, that has been done. Like I'm
Right.
still working on it actively. And I know I said almost 100%. I've had several black males in my life who have also helped, but that first circle was women. So James, I know you and I have had a lot of great conversations, not to exclude the males in my life, but
Right.
it
Right. Right.
started with a group of black women.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I want to hop back into this. Um, why? I know we love math. Why is math mastery so important? You've dedicated a lot of your life into making sure
Mhm.
that students master math. Why is it so important?
I really think about it as being a problem solver, just
Mm,
in general.
yeah,
My mission is not to have kids master the quadratic equation or the Pythagorean theorem, but I want students, and now my students lots of times are teachers and principals, like whoever the students are,
yeah,
I want them to have critical thinking skills to make informed decisions in life. period, the end. And I think math is a great way to do that. If you can look at a problem and think about how to solve it, which is what I don't believe in anymore. I used to believe in lots of little, we're going to do solve, or we're going to do cubes, we're going to underline, we're going to circle keywords. Now I'm like, let's just look at a problem and make sense of it. I'm a big fan of sense making, pattern seeking, making connections, looking for reasonableness. All of those things I just think are such important skills. We have to have critical consumers of data now. I mean, there's more false data out there than ever before. You can scroll social media and get a bunch of articles that are just made up and facts that are made up. So like, I want to teach our students to be critical consumers of knowledge in general. When they see things, I want them to question it. I want them to look for connections. I want them to understand data, because I want them to be able to contribute to their community in a meaningful way. And I think that the skills we learn in math, and when I say skills, I mean sense-making, problem solving, not adding fractions, right? But when I think about those standards for mathematical practice, that's what I want. That's what I want us all to have. And I think is what's going to be needed if we're ever going to come together and have discussions around important topics in meaningful ways.
I have taught, you're the sixth person, because this is the sixth episode. And so many of us have said the same thing. Why doesn't our classrooms look like that? When I ask everybody, like, why is math mastery so important? People talk about, I think they use words like the real life application and solving problems and making meaning of life and bringing humanity, like just. And I just like, if we are all thinking this, maybe we're not all thinking this. Maybe my circle is thinking this.
I think might be your circle.
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I have to expand the circle, our circle of influence. But this is what we are all saying. Why doesn't it look?
Why can't we make it happen?
Yeah.
Is that a hypothetical or a real question?
I don't know. I don't know what it is right now, but it's just on my heart. You can make it whatever you want to make it. You'd be like, James, that's great. Or James, I have a thought with that.
I mean, I have some thoughts. And I really think I think a lot of people want that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easy to get bogged down in things like, but we've got to worry about testing, and but my admin wants this, and but this, and but there's these structural things. But we just always have to remember that the heart of it, why we went into it, and that's to get students to bring their full selves, right, into the world, period. I know when my students used to say, like, well, Miss Arberg, when are we ever going to use this? When am I going to use this? I wasn't the teacher that was like, well, if you do become an engineer, you will need the quadratic. Like, I didn't try to give answers for when you really are going to use the quadratic equation, because let's be very real. 95% of students really will never need the quadratic equation, right? So I would always use the analogy of, well, do you play sports? Yes. Okay, well, tell me what you do in your practice for whatever sport. Oh, we do sprints, we do push-ups, we do pull-ups, we do sit-ups. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, why do you do sit-ups during a game? Do you do pull-ups during a game, push-ups during a game? And they're like, no. I'm like, right, those are just the skills that are making you stronger to do the real thing. Like what we're learning now, solving these problems, are the skills you need to do the real thing, which is to be have a really full life as a human.
Yeah.
Right. And I do think that's why we want to do it, James. We do. We all feel passionately, but I think with podcasts like this, more teachers will be exposed and might have the tools to do that.
I've never heard someone describe, when are we going to use this in life? Like that whole scenario of push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and you don't do that out there on the court. You don't do that out there on the field. I'm a big tennis fan. It's one of my favorite sports. It is my favorite sport. And I'm just like, the things that you do there, the conditioning that it takes for you to perform and to show up, that's not what you're doing out there. They're strengthening it. I love it, Jen. And I'm taking it. I am.
Take it. Quote it is yours. Trademark it. James O'Neill.
Yeah, I'm going to say Jen Arberg. That's who I'm going to say. So I love the fact that you talked about your journey and your supporting of teachers. And you've gotten to talk about, some of the things, the mistakes you've made, and just giving teachers the benefit of the doubt. One of my colleagues, Rob Leichner, I remember in a PD one day, professional development workshop, and that's the first thing he said. And I was like, that's the first time I heard somebody not blame us. Like, I believe that, and I really felt at his heart. Like, I think you're doing the best you can. And I'm just here to show you a better way.
Yeah.
Should you be opened up to it, a way that can reach more kids, since that's what you're about. And I'm also reading a book right now called The First 5 Years, a young man that wrote the book. And he talked about, and I underlined the statement that we're literally in a profession that is not about us. And when you think about our society, specifically over here in the West, it's all about us. Like that's what we are so
individualistic.
Yes. And we get into a job where it's just like, it's about the kids, about the kids, about the kids. And sometimes you get tired of hearing that, because there should be a balance that the human that teaches the kids, that human needs respect, that human needs love, that human needs SEL, if you would, at the adult level, to support, to make sure that other human, called the child or the student that they're supporting, that they can do that effectively. But I love the humanity that you bring to this work. And so I want to ask you this, and this is one of the two last questions I want to dig into before we go.
All right.
Is there anything about education, the way we do it, you can speak to math education, you can speak to education in general, that you would personally change?
How much more time do we have? Is there anything about the way we do school?
Yes.
That I would love to change?
Yes.
Specifically with math education?
You can talk to specifically with math. And then if you want to branch out into the world of education, go for it.
James, we could do a whole podcast just on Jen's dream world.
We could. Maybe that'll be was it 6, 7?
All right. Yeah. Okay. There are a lot. I'm trying to think of some that aren't necessarily as obvious, because of course,
you had to pick 3 things, then
3 things. Okay. I would really like to change the way we do professional development for teachers. Teaching is really hard, and it is like the only profession that I know of where, like, if you want to learn more about how to do it, you either have to give up your time in the summer when you're not paid, or you have to take off work and write lesson plans to prep for it, to go to PD. Like, I want teachers to get ongoing embedded professional development. I want people in their classrooms helping them co-teach lessons. That is what I hear from teachers all the time is, I'm doing the best I can. Show me how to do it differently.
Yeah.
You don't change teacher practice by going to spend one day at a conference and then coming back.
Yeah.
So I want teachers to get better support, better ongoing coaching and professional development. That is one thing. Second, I would love to see us go to more of a standards-based grading and away from letter grades. And I would like to really look at the way we assess students, because I still feel like in a lot of times students are being graded on behavior.
Yeah.
They're being graded on whether they sit still in class and have neat handwriting, whether or not they have the best looking poster board for the at-home project. Like, I would love to focus to where we're getting on where students are really being evaluated on their thinking and reasoning that they're doing in the classroom. That is my second. And for third, I would really like to somehow make it so teachers have more of a sense of community to collaborate, where it's not just this one 45-minute PLC where you also have a staff meeting, you have to plan for the assembly, you have to do field trip tickets, you have to do all of that. I would love to see teachers getting dedicated time to plan and collaborate with their colleagues, whether it's paid substitutes, whatever it is, but really it goes along with that coaching. but we shouldn't be writing lesson plans and curriculum in isolation. Like, we're better together. How can we leverage that, not just in your school, but across your district, your state, your country? I mean, if COVID taught us anything, it's we can collaborate virtually. How can we do that meaningfully so that teachers feel supported on a larger scale? Those are just 3 off the top of my head.
I love your dream world for education. I want to go. I want to be a part. I want to
pay us more and give us more respect in the media. Also that.
Oh, I love it, 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 love it. And so my last question for you today, Jen, is your personal mission in advancing mathematics education. What is that personal mission?
I mean, if you're asking the question, what do I want to be when I grow up? I haven't figured it out yet. My personal mission is, I think about that sticky note. What can I do to make sure every student sees themselves as a learner and doer of mathematics? How can I help to make sure that every student is getting access to grade level instruction that's engaging, affirming, and meaningful?
Mm-hmm.
Really is my mission. Whether it is helping principals train teachers, whether it is helping teachers craft lessons where students see themselves in the math, whether it is working with district math coaches in terms of adopting curriculum where students see themselves, helping principals set up scheduling and looking at multiple indicators for success so we're not using a single test score to determine student placement. Any avenue that I can help in any of those areas that's going to make students feel like math class is where I belong, that is my mission.
I want to be there.
I'm sure a lot of your other podcasters have said it more eloquently, but that
is no, Jen.
Off the top of the head response, but that is what I feel passionate about.
We have coined Genergy, which needs to be trademarked for yourself, but copywritten, whatever it needs to happen, it needs to happen. You have given me a new respect for Genergy. A new
different level of Genergy today. You saw a fiery level of Genergy. Tell your podcasters my face got a little red.
Come on here. I loved it. Hey, everybody. This has been another podcast episode of Is Math a Racist Subject? This time with my wonderful friend, Jen Arberg, who has given us her brilliance. Jen says, is math racist? She said,
the subject, not necessarily the instruction. Sometimes.
Yeah, and there we have it, straight from the brilliant one's mouth. Thank you so much, Jen, for joining me today. And everybody, have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me, James. I've enjoyed it.
Listen, I hope you got everything you needed from this episode. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, do what you got to do to get this message out. As we talk about getting the message out, I would love to extend the offer to work with you and your teachers, whether it be a speaker, whether it be professional development, consulting, or even coaching. I am about that mastery for all life. So I want to extend that offer to you. My information is on the screen. But above all else, I'm super excited that you had space enough to welcome me into wherever you're listening to me at, all right? So I'm super excited that you decided to join me. Today. Have an amazing day.